I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Debbie, here with Jeymes "The Bullet" Samuel, director, writer, producer, and composer for his new film and feature directorial debut, The Harder They Fall. Jeymes, everyone wants to talk about this, but I think we really can't ignore that while the events of this film are fictional, and you make it quite clear, you're very clear about these people existed, right? You're bringing balance to this genre, and it's about bloody time. Talk us through why you wanted to spotlight people of color and women in this genre.
Well, because, you know, growing up, I loved Westerns, right? I've loved them my whole life. Pretty much, they were the soundtrack to my childhood. Like, growing up in London, a Western is always on television. If it's in the day, it would be one of the soap operas. You know, you're home from school and reruns of Bonanza are on it. And then, you know, in the evenings, your parents are just watching all of these movies, these cool movies, not even in the evening, sometimes in the day. And I loved them. I was addicted to Westerns since I was a kid, and I loved the scenery, the landscape, and I loved the stories. But then you get older and you wonder why you're not seeing yourself in those movies, or everyone that looks like you or everyone of color is subservient or treated less than human, or is always given a reason why they're there. Like, if you're black, you're an ex-slave. And after a while, you can't turn away from these things. And then you look at all the women characters in these Westerns in that genre, and they were always subservient, which is totally unrealistic to man and to life. And so I really started just learning more and more about the Old West as I got older. And I find out all of these amazing characters that really existed, of color and women of all colors. And as I started writing, I just basically started like making little short films and putting these characters in it and making fictional tales, utilizing these real characters. And then about 10 years ago, I wrote and directed a short film called They Die by Dawn. It was a Western. It starred Michael K. Williams, the late, great Michael K.
Yeah.
Rosario Dawson, Erykah Badu, Jesse Williams, Isaiah Washington, Nate Parker, Roger Guenveur-Smith, Harry Lennox, Bokeem Woodbine, Giancarlo Esposito. I put all these amazing actors in this short film. I shot the short film, and then I just went about for the next 10 years, you know, getting The Harder They Fall made, where I can bring all of those amazing real characters back and bring it home and blast the rooftops of everything we've come to know and learn about the Old West. Bring balance to the force.
Bring balance to the force. It's about bloody time.
Thank you, brother.
And so you sit down to watch this film. I didn't know what really to expect, although I had seen your previous short, so I had some idea that it was going to be, you know, a pretty visceral experience. The title sequence at the outset is a complete stunner. It's coupled with this track, Guns Go Bang, by Kid Cudi and Jay-Z, who's obviously very involved in the soundtrack and score of this film. Why did you ultimately decide to go with that kind of track as the grand opener to this film?
Because the song itself, one, you know, soundtracks these days a lot of times are just glorified compilation albums, right? There's a bunch of songs. They might have one or two that have something to do with the movie, but really it's just a bunch of songs that have nothing to do, and they could be on any album. But every song, I wrote all the songs on the soundtrack, right? And I composed the score. So every single song is a direct thought of a particular scene and of a particular place in time. Every song on the album. And My Guns Go Bang, something I wrote with Kid Cudi and Jay, and the first lines is Avalon be damned, I ventured far and land, I laid my sword in the sand, I made my peace with man. You're talking about Nat Love. That's where Nat Love is after he kills the guy in the church, Jesus Cortez, and he's made his peace with man. He's saying they lay a violent feast as far as eyes can see. I hunt the golden fleece. I hope you've made your peace. And he starts talking about what would happen if you bring him back to that place. Come to find out, he soon gets brought to that place, and hence The Harder They Fall, but the song itself has everything to do with the movie. And also Jay-Z, in 12 bars, he rhymes the entire story of the film, right? That 17 would switch, it'll change it. Mama always said you was an angel. Papa got ghosts, but those walls never came through. It's real statement to onset the film with. And I love great openings, right? I love great openings like the classic Bond openings, but this is the opening of The Harder They Fall. I wanted to make a statement. I also wanted visually to show who the characters are playing. I haven't had that properly since like The Sting with Robert Redford and Paul Newman. Like Regina King as Trudy Smith, Idris Elba as Rufus Buck, Jonathan Majors as Nat Love. I love that thing. So My Guns Go Bang just fits with everything and tells the story of where we are at that particular point in time of the tale. Exactly where it comes in is exactly where we are. So it's perfect for me.
Yeah, to me, it was like a palate cleanser. It was like, okay, buckle in, because this is going to be
a hell of a ride.
And it was.
Yeah,
you know, your background and grounding in music production and composition is so obvious in your choices you make as a director and writer. For example, you have brought together some really interesting artists like Fatoumata Jawara and like Barrington Levy, and people that I've not really heard of before, but now I'm seeking out on Spotify and just to wonder, like, who are these people? What was the thinking in bringing in artists from, you know, parts of Africa and the Caribbean and the UK? Why did you do it that way?
I wanted to show how one, and how one, I wanted to show the oneness of what everything is. How you can have a reggae track. Barrington Levy is literally down below me, rehearsing for the jump off we have on Wednesday. Literally, that's him playing in the background in New York. I wanted to show how the same we all are, how similar we all are, whether it's Fatoumata Diawara from Mali, or Myra Andrade from Cape Verde, Jay-Z from Brooklyn, Barrington Levy from Jamaica, Laura Mvula from the UK, Jadakiss from Yonkers.
Yeah.
And to show how the oneness of how everything is, and the palette that it fits on with a Western underneath, and how it's just all seamless, especially if it all comes from one person. It's like a complete thought. But in my head, the sounds of Jay-Z goes on the exact same dish as the sounds of the South African opera singer Pretty N, right? It goes on the exact same dish as Jadakiss and Conway the Machine, which goes on the exact same dish as CeeLo and Lauryn Hill. So it's all one complete thought.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in terms of the music for this film, obviously there are some beautiful Western touches and motifs, which is important to kind of bring us into this genre, but it's also very pulsating, percussive hip-hop aesthetic, which could have crashed and burned. It really could have, but it doesn't. Talk us through the balance that you strike between going back to recognizable Western motifs and then something new and fresh that actually works, that doesn't feel anachronistic at all.
Well, what we have to do is look at what we regard as Western motifs. So if we look at, say, Rio Bravo with John Wayne, right, and Dean Martin. When Dean Martin sings, "My rifle, my pony, and me on the way to the river," Jesse James and Billy the Kid never heard any such song. That wasn't cowboy music. When we listen to "Ride 'em Up, Get 'em Up, then Rawhide," Billy the Kid and Wild Bill Hickok didn't hear anything like that. When we hear Ennio Morricone go, ding, 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 ha, 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 wait, they win. Wait, they win. Pat Garrett and Jesse James and the coward Robert Ford, the assassination of Jesse James. Jesse James never heard anything like the electric guitar. In fact, I doubt he heard of electricity.
That's right.
so those aren't Western motifs. Those were modern music that Hollywood will put behind it. But because we look at it like, it's like when we say the Old West, right, Robert? No cowboy lived in the Old West. It was old when Hollywood made those movies. They lived in the New West, in the new frontier, the new America. What they were using, as far as they were concerned, was FaceTime and the iPhones and Apple. They were technologically advanced as far as they were concerned. So I looked at that and I thought about it, and I didn't, while I love the big orchestral, I love what Elmer Bernstein did to Magnificent Seven. I love those big scores and the big themes. And so while I keep those like the big orchestra, I do something different with it. I take a trip to Jamaica and put dub under it. Jing, 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 jing. Oh, jing, 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 jing. Oh, jing, 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 jing. Oh. It's a total different feel, and it sounds modern, but it's, to me, it's just as cowboy as my rifle, my pony, and me.
Yeah.
Which wasn't, you understand what I'm saying?
I 100% know what you're saying, and that is so dope. It's so true. Jeymes, we've run out of time, man, but I want to bring you back now for our group panel chat, but I really thank you, and congrats on a great soundtrack and film.
Thank you so much, my brother.
No worries.
David, one down, forever to go. Let's go.
That's it.